Recording.
Welcome here. Thanks for joining us tonight. Excuse me, hot tea, my glass is just all fogged up. Alrighty, so welcome. If you haven't done so, take just a moment to give yourself space from today and the week and whatever stress you may be dealing with, having been dealing with. Just bring yourself present tonight. And for the next hour, no worldly responsibilities. Just relaxing into the spirit and partaking of our connection together. All right, welcome. So, I hope you all had good week, good holidays for those of you celebrating the Palm Sunday, Easter ones for the last couple of weeks. And we're approaching the time of Passover also, which is a little later this year. Usually it's before Easter, often it is, or right close to it. It's a little bit later this year. So anyway, tonight is another one of the multiple readings on a topic. And the topic tonight is the heavens in the Bible versus the kingdom of heaven. And I'm going to point out what appears to be a distinction to me tonight in how those things are looked at and how they're talked about in the Bible. Because that word is used a great deal in Christian theology. And without trying to oversimplify or shortchange anything, kind of my summation of mainstream fundamental Christian theology is that God created everything, and that including the heavens, plural, and the earth, but the way it's almost always presented in Christianity is that there is a a singular heaven and a singular earth, and that we have one lifetime on this earth, and that after that lifetime there's a judgment. And as a result of that judgment, our souls either go to the heaven and are with God and with Jesus and with those we love if they've been saved, and have an eternity of bliss and happiness and love and peace and all those things we want. But if we're judged badly, then one of two things happens, and Christianity doesn't seem to be real clear on this. Either our souls are put into hell and tormented in agony, literally forever and ever. Hold on, I've got to mute somebody who didn't hear when they came in. And the other alternative is that the souls can actually be destroyed, that the soul is not immortal and can be actually destroyed. So that's sort, and that the criteria for the judgment of whether we go to heaven or hell after this one life is based solely on what we believe. And if we believe that Jesus is the Son of God and our personal Savior, and confess that and are baptized, there's a number of little other requirements, then we are saved. And that if we don't, no matter how good a person or what good we do in our life, we still go to hell. So that's kind of the basic summation. Now, the other thing is that I was taught, and from what I've studied, many are taught, growing up in some Christian denomination, that heaven consists not only of being with God in some kind of lovely paradise where there's no death, no illness, no separation, no sorrow, no tears, that the streets of heaven are paved with gold, that there are pearly gates at the entrance to heaven, that there are angels playing harps and so on. Probably you've heard some of those things. And so while it's too big a study, obviously, for a few minutes here in our time this evening before the meditation, but I do want to point out some verses that deal with that, because like other religious traditions, fundamental mainstream Christianity says many things and have taught them for centuries that if you look, they're not actually in the Bible. In the Bible, or the Bible doesn't actually say that. And that's true in other traditions as well. Some of what has become popularized teachings of Hinduism, of Buddhism, of Islam, whatever, the things they teach are not in their own holy scriptures, or they're in it, but differently than it's commonly taught. So I will share some of these with you. And the first one is from, again, if you ever want these quotes, just let me know. I can send you the list. You don't have to write them down. Probably you don't anyway, but for those who are studious and would like to check this out on your own. The first one is the very first opening line of Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And even in most English Bibles, heaven is plural here. In some English Bibles, it's not. But in the original Hebrew, it is always plural. Shemayim is plural, meaning the heavens. So there's multiple heavens that were created, according to this. And then earth is singular, according to this. And it always is singular in all the various translations. So whatever heavens it or are, is or are, God created them along with the earth, according to in this recounting. Then in Genesis 28:16, this is about Jacob's dream and what the place called Jacob's ladder. The Lord is certainly in this place, and I did not know it. And Jacob said, after awakening from his dream, how awesome is this place! This is the house of God and the gate of heaven. So now we have a reference to a gate to heaven. And there are other references to gates to heaven as well. I'll get to one of them later. But interestingly enough, where he was physically, there was clearly no gate. So that wasn't what he was talking about. And also, interestingly enough, where did he experience that gate to heaven in this recounting? Not at the physical place he was, because he was at that place before he slept and before he dreamed, and he didn't experience that. Where did he experience the gate of heaven? He experienced it while he was out of his body, sleeping in some dream state. So it was an inner experience, not an external. So that's an important facet, because that's often the case when teachers or prophets in the Bible are writing about their experience of heaven or being taken to heaven or different levels of heaven. Those are inner experiences, not physical localities that they're going to. Okay, then from the New Testament, these are a few quotes from Yeshua. This is from Matthew 4:17. Jesus began teaching, quote, "Repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand." So that word repent, by the way, is a bit of a mistranslation. It, at least in connotation, it really literally means to come back or to turn around, or to return. Probably a better translation would be return, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, meaning return to God. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. And this phrase, when Jesus uses it, it's singular. It's not the kingdom of heavens or the kingdoms of heaven. It's the kingdom of heaven. And as we progress through this tonight, notice how he talks about it differently than elsewhere where the heavens, plural, are talked about. So the kingdom of heaven is at hand, meaning it's present right now. So it's not some after death experience, it's not some distant otherworldly experience, it's present in whatever form he meant right now. Then in Matthew 5:3, blessed are the poor in spirit. That was a euphemism, meaning humble. Blessed are the humble, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Same phrase. So whatever the kingdom of heaven is, it's present right now, and it's accessible to those that are humble. So those are some important teachings that we have. Later, Matthew 13:11, Yeshua was with his apostles in private and talking to his apostles, not to the public, and he says to them, "To you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them on the outside it has not been granted." That's a whole other teaching in itself about the inner and outer aspects of spiritual teachings. But what it's saying is that the apostles have been granted the secrets or the mysteries of this kingdom of heaven, whereas the public doesn't know it. So I'm just piecing together a few things here that is not what the Bible says, but what I'm saying, that Yeshua taught the kingdom is present right now and at hand, that it is accessible, at least to some, one of those groups being the humble, and that the apostles were instructed in the secrets of the kingdom of heaven and how to enter into that, how to live in that kingdom, whereas the public didn't know how and had not received those teachings. Another clue from Yeshua, this is Matthew 18:3, truly I tell you, unless you become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. So again, kingdom of heaven, singular. And so we're assuming that it's talking about the same thing Yeshua's been talking about, this kingdom that is at hand, that is somehow accessible, that the apostles are taught how to access, and that in one saying, the humble will have access to it, and in this saying now, unless you become childlike, you also will not be able to enter into it. So this is another qualification. And I don't know what you take from that, but one of the things that I take from it that is often associated with childhood, particularly young childhood, is innocence. So I'm going to say this verse is talking about the innocent also have access to it. And this is now from Paul writing in the second letter to Corinth. This is chapter 12, verse 2. I knew a man in Christ 14 years ago. Whether it was in the body, I do not know, or out of the body, I do not know, but God knows. This man was caught up to the third heaven. So that saying right there is an interesting one from two standpoints. Paul is talking about remembering a man that he knew, and he can't remember whether he knew the man in the body or whether he knew the man out of the body. So now we're talking again about inner experiences and not physical versus physical ones. And he doesn't remember if somebody he actually knew physically or somebody he met out of body in one of those higher states of consciousness. But anyway, that particular man was taken up to the third heaven. Now, this is the only place that I'm aware of in the Bible that describes heaven having different heavens or different layers, perhaps, to heaven. And this third heaven, again, is that part of the kingdom of heaven that Yeshua is talking about? Or is this a different thing? Because heavens, the heavens that God created, was something that was created. So is this one of those heavens that was created? And is that different than the kingdom of heaven, which is right here? Are they the same or are they different? So, because Paul is not talking about the kingdom of heaven being present at hand. He's not talking about that in his writings either. And he's not talking about the apostles knowing how to access that, the public not. He's talking about being taken up out of body into another region, probably a region of consciousness, but to another realm, not something here. So this is a distinction again. And now Paul writes in the letter to Ephesians in 1:10, regarding God's plan for the fullness of time, he will bring all things together in Christ, all things in the heavens, plural, and all things on the earth, singular. So this is now the same kind of reference that Genesis had. The heavens that God created and the earth that God created. And that Paul is saying that God's plan is, at some point, all those things of the heavens and the things of the earth will be brought together through the work of Christ. However he understood that, and whatever that means, he's clearly now talking again, not in the same way Yeshua was, about whatever this kingdom of heaven at hand is, but that these higher realms, this spiritual creation, these heavens that God created, and what's on earth would somehow be brought into a oneness or brought together somehow, as opposed to the separation between them. And then the another aspect is that, which I didn't think to make quotes of, but another thing you can find easily in the Bible, is that sometimes when it's talking about the heavens, like looking to the heavens, and then they talk about the stars and planets and moon. So now they're talking about the celestial heavens, the universe, if you will, beyond the earth planet itself. And that word is the same word, Shemayim, the heavens. So they're talking now about a physical thing that's part of this creation, but not part of this planet. So the sun, moon, and stars are often referred to as the heavens, also in the biblical record. So that's yet another facet that uses the same word to talk about something that's clearly those things are not on earth and accessible right now. Certainly weren't back then anyway. I guess we can access them somewhat now. And clearly it wasn't a state of consciousness. It was something physical versus this kingdom of heaven that seems to be more of a state of consciousness, and the heavens, which seem to be some other spiritual creation. So some distinctions here. Okay, going on, this is Paul again in the letter to Colossians. By him, all things were created, both the things in the heavens and the earth. Now we have the Genesis form again. The heavens and the earth. And that everything in both of those places was created by God. So, going on to that same verse, all things were created through him, both all those in heaven and those on the earth, all the visible and all the invisible. All things were created through him, by him, and for him. Now, this is an experience of John, who is supposedly the author of the book of Revelations. And this is clearly an inner experience, out of body, not this kingdom at hand here, but these heavens of some kind that the creation story talks about. So this is from Revelation 4:12. Immediately I was taken up in the Spirit. So now, again, we're not here. I was taken up in the Spirit, and I beheld a throne in heaven, and one sitting upon the throne. So in the biblical record, in the higher or highest sometimes of heavens, there is a throne of God, and there's a being upon that throne that prophets sometimes were taken up to and stood before that being on the throne. That being is referred to in the biblical record as God. It's referred to as the Lord. It's also referred to by a Hebrew name, Atika Kadishah, which means the Ancient of Days, or the Ancient Holy One, which is a phrase that's used to describe the Creator. And in the prophet Daniel, for example, he's taken up and stands before one and calls him the Ancient of Days. And that image is where we get God on a throne, a male figure, ancient, timeless, beyond old, that has very long, radiant white hair and very long, radiant white beard, and a countenance that is so bright it cannot be looked upon. So that image that many of us modern folks sometimes poo-poo about, well, we shouldn't anthropomorphize God, and God's not a male, and God, that's one of the places in Christian and Jewish literature where this image comes from, is the prophet Daniel and other prophets who wrote about the Ancient of Days, seeing it in a male form, very radiant, very ancient looking, with the long hair and the long beard. Kabbalah, mystical Judaism, writes about that as well, with an almost identical description. Am I saying God is a man? No. But am I saying that many spiritual experiences, including non-Christian, non-Jewish, in the writings of Sufi mystics, in the writings of yogis, in the writings of different mystics from other cultures, it is not uncommon for them to refer to seeing a God in the form of a being, a human-like being, and most often male, and very often with long hair and a beard. And there may be lots of reasons for that. It may be a cultural thing. It may be that's how they associated wisdom. It may be that's what they saw, and that we don't need to make excuses for it or think they were all sexist. That if they're recounting what they saw, there's nothing sexist about that. And if we're teaching that God is only male and male are better than female, clearly that's sexist, and clearly that's not what they taught. But anyway, that's a story we hear from different mystics when they're having these very high-level encounters. Okay, then just a few more. Revelation 11:19. The temple of God that is in heaven was opened, and I saw the Ark of his covenant there. So the Ark of the Covenant is something that existed in the days of Moses, has historically disappeared. There are lots of legends and myths about where it is and what happened to it. Many of them. In this particular version, they're seeing that Ark in heaven. And here, again, a temple of God in heaven that was opened is part of the recounting in John, in the book of Revelations, of being taken up to these other regions of heaven. So not this kingdom of heaven here, but these created realms that are far beyond this earth. Pardon me. Now, does it say that there are pearly gates in heaven in the Bible? Actually, believe it or not, yes, it does say that. That is biblically present. And some ideas about heaven that we've been told are not biblically there. For example, the idea that I was told that when we die and we go to heaven, we will meet other people we loved there who died before us. Family members, parents, whatever. People that we are very dear to us that we've met will be a family again in heaven. We'll reconnect there, and we'll all see each other there. That is not biblical. It does not say that. So I'm not saying it's not true, but it's not biblically based. When the one time Yeshua was asked about that, whether people who were married on earth are married in heaven and whether they find them there, he doesn't say whether or not they find them there. He says that in heaven, there are no marriages and that people don't have that relationship with one another. So, that's again not kind of the story that I was told. So this is the pearly gates part, Revelations 21:21. In heaven, there are 12 gates that are like 12 pearls, each one of the gates being like a single pearl. And the streets of that holy city were pure gold, like transparent glass. So that's one of the images, that has come down in the theologies, is gates to heaven. Now, typically, when I've heard the story, it's gates. Like there's a single gate, and and I've also heard it's guarded by St. Peter. That's a Catholic version. That there's a gate to get into heaven. This, biblically, the only place, well, not the only place, but here when it's talking specifically about the gates of heaven, it says there are 12, not one. And it does not say that actually they're made of pearl. It says they look like pearl. And it also does not say, it does say the streets were pure gold, but it says like transparent glass. Well, glass isn't gold. And so I think the idea here, both of the pearly gates and of the streets of gold, is not that they were made of pearl or they were made of gold, but that iridescent radiance that pearl has, that they look like that. It was an iridescent, shimmery light, and that the streets were golden in color and yet transparent like glass and clear, as opposed to solid or thick or dense, which is, again, a common experience of the higher realms, is this radiant luminosity and this golden light, which is often described in the higher realms. And many of the saints, if you think about pictures of the saints from, say, the Middle Ages, have a halo around them, and that is gold. You don't see saints with a blue halo around them, or a red halo around them, or a black halo around them. It's gold. So, all right, the very last one of the quotes tonight is from Paul's letter to Timothy. It's 2 Timothy 4:18. I know this, that the Lord will rescue me from every evil and bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom forever and ever. So now we have a rare instance where the kingdom and heaven, the heavens, are together. And that Paul is sure that he'll be saved from evil and that he will end up in the heavenly kingdom. So is that the distant or otherworldly heavens that the creation stories talk about? Is it the kingdom of heaven that is present at hand right now? If it's present at hand right now, then the rescue that Paul is talking about has to be imminent in his life physically right now. If it's something in another realm after he's dead, then obviously it's a future event. And we don't really know from the context exactly how he understood that. Part of the problem is that when you have people who are live teachers, as were Paul and the apostles and Yeshua and so on, and Moses, that when you have that, the teachers have plenty of time, a lifetime, to explain their teachings to people that they see and talk to and teach every day, or nearly every day. And so there's a much greater clarity of understanding and a greater depth that those who heard them teach have than we have reading sparse accounts of certain things they said, sometimes out of context, that were written decades after they were dead. And we're reading them thousands of years later, after multiple translations. It's difficult to know really what they were teaching and what they believed and what they taught. Now, in some instances, of course, it's clear. But many times things like this, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, the heavens, how did they understand that? We have some, but we have very few clues as to really how they understood that, which more than likely people in their time that were being taught by them regularly had a greater clarity of what they were saying and what they meant. And if they didn't have that clarity, they would ask questions like people do today of teachers and get more insight, hopefully. So one of the things that is taught by mystics is that these higher states of consciousness that souls throughout our history have written of encountering, have encountered them primarily in three states. They've encountered them in meditation, they've encountered them in out-of-body experiences like sleep or dreams, or they've encountered them after death. And there are instances where people have had these, back then as well as now, had these death experiences and then were revived or resuscitated or somehow returned and wrote about it. So these higher experiences that have been recounted from meditations, from dreams, and from death experiences are not physical in nature. They're spiritual in nature. And many of them even talk about being taken out of the body, like Paul's thing of the third heaven, or John's, I was lifted up into spirit, those kind of phrases. So there's a shift in our consciousness that we can experience, whether it's completely internal and only our consciousness where it's being experienced, or whether in fact our consciousness can exist outside of the body, which I believe and is part of the mystical teachings worldwide. Our consciousness is independent of our body and therefore can experience other realms of being with awareness and come back to the body and retain at least some awareness of those experiences and some memories of those experiences. So, but the experiences themselves, you don't read, for example, as a general rule, you don't read about a prophet or a mystic in any tradition saying my physical body was taken from Fort Wayne to China, and then in China I met this teacher and I worked with him on Tai Chi, and then my physical body was transported back to Fort Wayne again. That's not the kind of recounting that we hear. We hear I was asleep, or I was in a dream, or I had died, and I was taken to this other realm, or the Spirit took me to, or the hand of God took me to, or I was lifted up in spirit to this throne of God. So it's not that the body is having these experiences, it's that the soul is having these experiences. So the last piece I want to share, and we'll go into meditation, is that Yeshua emphasized that the kingdom of heaven was something we could experience now. And the writings of most mystics express that too, that it is not an only after death experience. It is possible to experience these higher states right now. And that there are multiple higher states that can be experienced. And that there is while there's divergence and uniqueness, there's a commonality to the type of higher consciousness that souls experience. Whether it's written about by a mystic 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago or one a week ago, there's very great similarity in what those experiences are like. And then there's the uniqueness of how each of those souls experiences it. Not unlike, let's say you've never been to Alaska and you'd heard about it, seen pictures, and knew people maybe that went there, but you've never been there. So everything about Alaska is really hearsay. You're convinced it exists, you're convinced people have been there who've told you they've been there and shared their experiences, but you've never been there. You have no direct knowledge of Alaska at all. And then you go there. You go to Alaska. And what you discover is that what the people who've been there told you was true. There's Mount McKinley. There's Anchorage. There's these various things that you see in Alaska that they've seen. There's the Northern Lights. And you see these things and go, oh, what they told me, I'm seeing that now. This was really real. However, if you spent most of your time in Juneau and they spent most of their time in Anchorage, you're going to have a very different kind of experience of Alaska. If you spent most of your time out in the wilderness where you had to fly in by bush plane to even get there versus being in a city, you're going to have a different experience of Alaska. So when mystics talk about these inner experiences, there is a common ground that's recognizable of I'm having the kind of experience they were having, but there's also the individual experience that you have of it that's unique. If you live here in Fort Wayne, as many of you do, your experience of Fort Wayne and what Fort Wayne is like and what kind of a city Fort Wayne is and what it's like to live in Fort Wayne, even though you live here, and so do I, your take on it's going to be different than mine. Your experience of living here is going to be different than mine. So the idea that in mysticism is that it is possible to have the experience for yourself and not rely on a book or a teacher or somebody else's recounting of it. Not that those can't help us to understand, but that you can have the experience for yourself and discover for yourself what is real about all this and what isn't. So part of the promise is that we can experience the love and peace and joy of God now. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to wait to some future lifetime. We don't have to wait till we're dead and go to some other realm. That we can experience the love, joy, and peace of God now. And that as we learn to access those states of consciousness, we can experience those qualities of God more fully and more often in our lives and be less caught in separation, less caught in illusion, less caught in suffering. And maybe we can never overcome that completely in a body, but we can certainly experience much greater fullness of love, peace, and joy than we are. That there's much more available to us. And that's kind of the promise of all the teachers of the ages is, as you learn to access these parts of you, these divine parts of you, and really yield to that and let that really come into your consciousness, you will have more of those experiences and it will change qualitatively your life. Not maybe fix all your circumstances, but definitely change the quality you experience in your life. So let's just begin to bring our attention inside and not engage the mind quite so much, and just begin to relax into what is that divine part of you, that soul of you, that inner essence of you. And how is it that you most readily connect to it? It may be in meditation like we're about to enter into. Maybe that's where you most often experience that timeless being of which you're part. It may be in prayer. Maybe you feel closest to that and most awake to it during praying. Maybe it's during study. Maybe it's when you're doing spiritual study that really comes present in your consciousness, and that's when you really feel it. Maybe it's when you're being kind to somebody, and in that moment, or they're being kind to you, in that moment of connecting with each other through loving kindness, that's where you really feel God, where you're really awake to it, where you really know it's true. Maybe it's in solitary isolation of just having quiet time to yourself in your home or in nature. Maybe that's where it is, looking up at the stars at night or something like that. Maybe it's listening to pieces of music that just stir you inside and fill you with possibilities and wonder. There are an infinite number of ways that we can awaken to and connect to and be immersed in that divine aspect of our life, of our being. So what is it that works for you? How do you do that? And how does it work best for you? Maybe all of them work a little, but maybe some things work better than others. So if you find time after time after time, year after year, that walking in nature fills you with that presence more than meditation does, then you know what? Spend more time walking in nature and less in meditation. I know that's a heresy. If it's meditation that does it and not engaging in connecting with other people so much, then spend more time in meditation. If it's study, spend more time in study. You get the idea. We have enough experience now to know what helps us to be awake to that reality, to that presence. So the ways that work best for you, do those. And the ways that other people, including me, tell you, well, this should work well for you. Well, try it and see. Maybe it will. But if it doesn't, then set that on the shelf and do the ones that work for you. Because the idea is not which technique you use, not which practice you do. The idea is, are you having the experience? Are you getting to that place of the divine in you? And what gets you there, do that. So let's bring our attention to quiet now. Because quiet is universally something recognized as a gateway into these higher states. Let the questioning within you just come to a greater calm. And the trying to figure out, just let that voice be more quiet within you. And just sense what's present in that stillness. Sense where that deeper peace resides in you, where you actually feel love, where there really is joy in your consciousness. And in this quiet stillness inside, invite yourself into any of those aspects of God you want to experience more fully. Invite yourself into wisdom and wisdom into you. Invite peace into you and yourself into peace. Invite joy or love or beauty or faith. Invite yourself into the reality of that essence and let it move in your consciousness in a way you can receive it. And then in the quiet, just pay attention to movement, to light, to sound, to presence. And if any of those come forward, move into that light, into that sound, into that presence. And just be with it. Now we just begin to slowly bring our attention back once more. So, the a couple of things that I think we can take from all of this, and as I said, it's a big topic and a big study, but whatever the reality is about after death, whatever is true about that, we all have different understandings and different beliefs, probably. What's clear is that while we're alive in these bodies, we can experience very different states of consciousness, both heaven and hell. We can absolutely experience hell states of consciousness right now in this body. We can experience physical agony and pain. We can experience emotional agony and pain, mental. We can experience hell states. We can also experience heavenly, blissful, ecstatic states. And most often, most of us are in between. You know, we're kind of in a bigger gray area where we have a little good, a little bad, and float back and forth between different things. But it's clear that we can experience different states of consciousness. It's also clear that where we hold our focus can affect which state of consciousness we experience. Somebody can wake up tomorrow morning to whatever the weather is, whatever the temperature is, whatever the day is, and that person has a comfortable home, enough food to eat, sufficient physical health to engage the day, has people in their life, has an income of some kind to sustain them. And another person wakes up to that same day, to the same weather, to the same temperature. They also have a home and food and clothing and sufficient health and sufficient income and whatnot. They have what they have. And the one person can wake up and think, what a miserable, rotten day. Another day that just is terrible. And who knows what terrible things are going to happen to me now. And the other person can wake up thinking, oh, thank God, what a beautiful day, and I'm so glad to be alive, and I wonder what wonderful things are going to happen to me today. And of course, everything in between. Because it's not the day that we awaken to. It's where we are in our awakening and how we see what we're awakening to. So our focus and our perspective has a radical impact upon the quality of consciousness that we experience, which is good news and bad, because if we hold to those lower self-defeating, self-hating parts of ourselves, then we experience a lot of dark consciousness. If we hold to the light and the good in us, we experience a lot of light consciousness. And so it's that we can affect significantly, not 100% perhaps, but we can affect significantly what kind of consciousness we're experiencing is a great gift. Many of us don't use it well, but it's a great gift. And many of us are convinced that we can't feel or think any other way than we do. But that's just the way it is. Given our circumstance, that's how you have to feel and think. But time and time again, that's been proved false. You have the ability to think differently than you do right now. You have the ability to feel differently than you do right now. And you have the ability to make choices that you're not making right now. We all have that ability. So, is it complete? Is it a panacea? And does it fix everything? I'm certainly not claiming that because that's not been true in my life. But is it a powerful realization to have that we can affect changes in our own consciousess? That's an amazing blessing. And so I encourage you this week to, if you're not already doing so, to explore using that in your life and see if you can't in some cases actually make your circumstances better, but even in those cases where you can't, make your experience of those circumstances better and less traumatic for yourself and for those around you. So may this be a week of greater heavenly and less hell consciousness for all of us. And may we live and speak in such a way that we can enhance the heavenly experience of those around us and not add to the hell experience that they're having. So I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I'm not teaching anywhere this weekend in Fort Wayne, for those of you in the area, in case you're wondering. But appreciate you joining me tonight. Into your hands I commend my spirit, all that I have, all that I am, forevermore. All of my life, everyone that I love, is in your hands, lives in your heart, forevermore. Into your hands I commend my spirit, all that I have, all that I am, forevermore. All of my life, everyone that I love, is in your hands, lives in your heart, forevermore, forevermore, forevermore. So, may your week be blessed, may you be a blessing. And I would suggest as an activity for this week that you pick at least one day and at least one person to share a blessing you have in your life for which you're deeply grateful, and just tell them about it. And after you've done so, invite them to tell you one of theirs. So, thank you. You're one of the things I'm grateful for in my life. Thank you for sharing with me and being present tonight. And by the way, we'll talk more about this in the future, but I'm experimenting with a new way of saving these recordings, so that perhaps we can make them available to anybody who wants to watch them without having to connect to me and me send you the link. So we'll see how that, I'm practicing with it now. We'll see if it works. And if it does, we'll let you know in the next couple weeks or whatever. So, all right, love you all. Going to end the recording now and say goodnight.